Could 2025 mark the downfall of these 10 countries? This video explores which 10 nations are facing the highest risks and what's driving them toward instability. We'll break down the political, economic, and environmental factors threatening their futures. Finally, we'll examine the global implications of these potential crises. We're diving deeper than headlines with clear, engaging insights that go beyond what you might expect. Stay with us for a thorough, eye-opening look at the forces shaping our world's most fragile regions. Number 1. Let's dive into Sudan's crisis. Since April 2023, Sudan has been torn apart by a power struggle between its national army, the Sudanese Armed Forces or SAF, and a powerful paramilitary, the Rapid Support Forces or RSF. How bad has it gotten? The conflict has led to intense battles throughout the country, creating waves of instability that affect every region. As a result, Sudan is facing a humanitarian crisis of historic proportions. With over 10 million people displaced, shelters and aid centers are overwhelmed, leading to severe shortages of basic supplies and healthcare services. The situation has become so desperate that international aid groups are calling for urgent support. But will it be enough? As the violence continues with no end in sight, Sudan's need for global intervention grows ever more pressing. Number 2. Now let's look at Ethiopia's internal challenges. Ethiopia is dealing with persistent violence, especially in Oromia and Amhara. Oromia sees clashes between government forces and the Oromo Liberation Army or OLA, which advocates for Oromo self-determination. This conflict has sparked intense crackdowns, tragically resulting in civilian casualties. Can this ongoing violence ever see a peaceful end? The Amhara region also faces its own unrest. When the federal government announced plans to disband regional militias in 2023, local resistance led to fierce clashes with government forces, prompting a state of emergency. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's economy is struggling under drought, high inflation, and currency devaluation. Climate change-related droughts are crippling agriculture, driving food insecurity, and pushing Ethiopia toward more humanitarian aid. These combined conflicts and economic woes underscore Ethiopia's urgent need for solutions to secure stability and meet humanitarian demands. Number 3. Turning to Niger. We see a major upheaval from the July 2023 military coup. General Abdurrahman Chiani led the military to detain President Mohamed Bazoum and his family, ending one of the Sahel's last pro-Western governments. But what prompted this drastic move? Rising anti-French sentiment and a sense of insecurity under Bazoum's rule fueled the coup, as military leaders cited national dissatisfaction. In response, ECOWAS imposed heavy sanctions, closing borders, freezing assets, and restricting trade. These measures hit Niger's economy hard, raising prices and cutting off vital supplies. On top of this, France and the US halted security assistance, further isolating Niger. Facing internal economic strain, Niger's junta now aligns cautiously with Mali and Burkina Faso, neighboring regimes similarly resistant to foreign intervention, as they navigate intense regional pressure for change. Number 4. Moving to Somalia, we see a nation devastated by climate and conflict. 5 consecutive failed rainy seasons from 2021 to 2023 caused the worst drought in decades, crushing agriculture and displacing 1.6 million people. Imagine losing your livestock and crops entirely. Millions now face extreme food security, with nearly 727,000 on the edge of famine by mid-2023. Then, in late 2023, severe rain struck, flooding parts of central and southern Somalia, displacing over 1 million more and triggering disease outbreaks like cholera. To complicate matters, ongoing conflict with Al-Shabaab impedes aid access in some regions. How can relief reach those in need when instability is constant? This climate conflict cycle amplifies Somalia's fragility, demanding urgent international intervention to stabilize and secure sustainable disaster management efforts. Number 5. Next, let's examine Mali's rising challenges. Security and economic hardships have intensified since the UN peacekeeping mission, MINUSMA, began withdrawing in 2023. Originally established in 2013, MINUSMA protected civilians and assisted in crisis areas, especially in the unstable north. But with peacekeepers set to fully exit by early 2024, will Mali's security forces manage the escalating violence alone? Armed groups have already advanced southward, closer to Bamako, threatening new regions. Economically, Mali struggles amid ongoing coups and ethnic tensions. The government's reliance on Russia's Wagner Group adds complexity, as Wagner's involvement has led to human rights violations that strain Mali's international relationships. Without the UN, militant and criminal groups may expand their reach, forcing more civilians to flee, worsening Mali's humanitarian crisis and deepening economic struggles as the country faces this uncertain future. Number 6. Shifting to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or DRC. The eastern regions are plagued by relentless conflict. Areas like Ituri, North Kivu, and South Kivu are overrun with armed groups, including the M23 rebel group, exploiting historical tensions, resource struggles, and weak governance. How deeply does this impact communities? With over 6.4 million people displaced, the DRC faces one of the continent's highest displacement rates, leading to a severe humanitarian crisis. About 25.4 million Congolese now need urgent aid, as food insecurity and malnutrition skyrocket, especially among children. The crisis is worsened by poor infrastructure and frequent disease outbreaks in conflict zones. To add to the challenges, MONUSCO's phased withdrawal leaves local forces without essential UN support, raising fears of worsening violence and further escalating humanitarian needs across this fragile region. Number 7. What's pushing Pakistan toward financial instability? In 2023, Pakistan teetered on the edge of default, burdened by over $125 billion in debt and soaring inflation, which reached 36.4% mid-year. This debt crisis, worsened by political unrest, has severely raised the cost of living. Pakistan's financial reliance on short-term IMF bailouts and loans from China, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE hasn't offered a long-term fix, as stringent IMF conditions demand painful measures like tax hikes and subsidy cuts. Political instability adds to the turmoil. Since Prime Minister Imran Khan's ousting in 2022, protests and legal battles have delayed elections, leaving a caretaker government without the mandate for needed reforms. This fragile environment discourages both local and foreign investment, limiting economic growth. Without deep reforms and steady leadership, Pakistan's path to economic recovery will likely remain uncertain and vulnerable to further setbacks. Number 8. How did Argentina reach such extreme inflation? By 2023, Argentina was grappling with inflation of 211%, one of the highest rates worldwide. This intense inflation, paired with a rapidly devaluing peso, left many essential items unaffordable for Argentinians. International reserves hit critically low levels, forcing the government to impose strict capital controls while seeking IMF support. Yet, keeping this aid requires Argentina to enact tough reforms, a big challenge in its politically polarized landscape. In the midst of this, President Javier Milei's libertarian policies add to the volatility. His administration has proposed subsidy cuts and possible dollarization to curb inflation. But these moves have stirred controversy, as Argentina's political divides, known as La Grieta, continue to hinder economic stability. With mounting debt obligations and limited options, Argentina faces the looming risk of default if reforms fail to balance fiscal austerity with social stability. Number 9. What's behind Egypt's rising financial instability? By late 2023, Egypt faced intense economic pressures, with inflation at 33.7% and food prices surging by 79%. These costs are hitting hard, eroding purchasing power and increasing poverty across the country. Additionally, Egypt's large debt load is straining its foreign currency reserves, critical for both debt repayments and essential imports. The Egyptian pound's decline has further weakened purchasing power, fueling widespread dissatisfaction. To combat these challenges, Egypt's government has enacted austerity measures and secured foreign investments, notably $35 billion from the UAE. Will this be enough? High youth unemployment and limited economic relief risk sparking social unrest, especially as austerity impacts deepen. President El-Sisi's administration maintains strong institutional control, yet economic hardships could heighten calls for change if relief remains limited. Number 10. How is Kenya handling its economic challenges? Kenya's economic instability has been driven by rising debt, high living costs, and austerity measures introduced under President William Ruto. Supported by the IMF, these measures aim to address Kenya's $35 billion debt. But what does this mean for ordinary citizens? Taxes have doubled on essentials like fuel, bread, and cooking oil, adding a heavy financial strain, especially on low-income households. Widespread dissatisfaction has erupted into protests, with tragic clashes leading to fatalities and arrests. The impact goes beyond finances, sparking social unrest as high unemployment and limited public services worsen poverty and inequality. Many young Kenyans have joined protests against what they see as unjust taxation that prioritizes debt repayment over social welfare. Without safeguards to support the most affected, Kenya's current path risks more instability and social tension. As we wrap up our look at nations facing instability, let's shift to something more uplifting, exploring places that embody resilience, beauty, and adventure. Did you know that California is home to breathtaking spots that span from ancient forests to futuristic cities? In our next video, we'll highlight unforgettable destinations across the Golden State, perfect for anyone looking to explore landscapes as diverse as the state itself. Stick around to discover which places you won't want to miss on your California journey.